Warning: based on a true story. Parental advisory. Not suitable for children. This video is a dramatized retelling of a real-life incident. It contains graphic and intense content, including mature themes and language, violent acts and imagery, shocking and disturbing events. Parents, please note, this content is not suitable for children. We strongly advise against allowing minors to watch this video, as it may cause emotional distress or trauma. Viewer discretion is advised. This content is intended for adult audiences only. If you are easily disturbed or triggered by graphic content, please exercise caution before watching. The Lawson Family Christmas Day Massacre. Christmas, a time when the world wraps itself in the warmth of love, joy, and family. The air hums with festive cheer, streets are lit with sparkling lights, and homes echo with laughter. It's a season where we believe nothing can go wrong. But what if I told you that this sacred day of celebration once bore witness to unimaginable horror? Picture this: Germanton, North Carolina, 1929. Snow blankets the rolling hills, the crisp air carrying the faint scent of pine. In a modest farmhouse perched on the edge of a tobacco field, the Lawson family prepares for Christmas Day, a day that will end not with the warmth of the holiday spirit, but with icy dread and unspeakable tragedy. This is not just a story. It is a journey into the darkness that can lurk behind the most serene of facades. It begins with a family's seemingly ordinary preparations for Christmas, and spirals into a chilling descent that will leave you questioning the line between love and madness. Charles Lawson, the family's patriarch, was not unlike any other man of his time, a farmer striving to provide for his wife and 7 children in the harsh throes of the Great Depression. But there was something about him, something no one could quite place. Some said he had been acting strange in the weeks leading up to Christmas, his eyes shadowed with a heaviness that even the brightest Christmas lights couldn't lift. And then there was the photograph. Just weeks before that fateful Christmas, Charles did something no one expected. He took his family into town and had a professional portrait taken. The photograph would become infamous. A chilling snapshot of a family, unknowingly on the brink of catastrophe. To this day, those who study it say the Lawson children's eyes glimmer with innocence, while Charles's gaze seems to hold something else entirely. Something heavier, something haunted. As the sun rose on Christmas morning, the Lawson family awoke to a day they believed would be filled with joy. But outside, the frosty landscape hid more than just snowdrifts. It hid secrets, despair, and a plan so horrifying that no one, not even those closest to Charles, could have seen it coming. The story of the Lawson family Christmas Day Massacre is not just one of tragedy, but of eerie premonitions and unanswered questions. Why did Charles Lawson, a man who seemed devoted to his family, suddenly transform into an instrument of destruction? What drove him to commit one of the most chilling crimes in American history? As we unravel this story, prepare yourself. The events you are about to hear are as chilling as the winter wind that howled through Germanton that fateful day. But before we dive deeper, a quick reminder. Welcome to Storyteller Pro, where we bring history's most mysterious and tragic events to life. If you're new here, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell icon to ensure you never miss another haunting tale. Now, settle in, because this is not just a story. It's a haunting descent into a Christmas that turned red with blood and black with secrets. And it all began on a cold December morning. The perfect Christmas, or so it seemed. The Lawsons were an unassuming farming family tucked away in the quiet rolling hills of Germanton, North Carolina. Charles Lawson, the patriarch, lived with his wife Fanny and their 7 children. Life wasn't easy. It was the height of the Great Depression. The air hung heavy with hardship, and every penny was stretched to its limit. But even in those trying times, the Lawsons managed to scrape by, finding small joys amidst the struggles of their modest existence. Yet, as Christmas approached, Charles began to behave differently. In the weeks leading up to the holiday, he did something so out of character that it left the entire town talking. One cold December afternoon, Charles gathered his family and announced they were going into town, a rare outing for a poor farming family like theirs. Not only that, but he insisted they buy brand new clothes. When they arrived, Charles spared no expense. He purchased fine dresses for the girls, polished shoes for the boys, and even a tailored suit for himself. The children, wide-eyed with excitement, marveled at their new outfits, while Fanny looked on bewildered. This wasn't like Charles. For years he had been known for his frugality, counting every penny, working tirelessly in the tobacco fields. Why now? Why this sudden burst of generosity? But the surprises didn't stop there. Charles then led his family to a photography studio, a place they had never set foot in before. Under the bright flash of the photographer's bulb, the Lawsons posed stiffly for what would become their first and last family portrait. For the townsfolk, this act was almost incomprehensible. Photography was a luxury reserved for the wealthy, and the Lawsons were anything but. Maybe he just wanted to give them a special Christmas, some neighbors whispered. Maybe he's turning over a new leaf. His eyes, dark and shadowed, held a look that was neither joy nor sorrow. It was something heavier, something haunting. Looking back, some would say that gaze belonged to a man wrestling with demons no one else could see. As the days crept closer to Christmas, Charles's behavior grew even more peculiar. Neighbors noticed him pacing the fields late at night, his figure barely visible against the frosty landscape. He seemed to be searching for something, or perhaps wrestling with a decision only he could understand. Fanny, ever the devoted wife, didn't ask questions, but she wasn't blind. She could feel the change in her husband, an unspoken tension that settled over the house like a dark cloud. As Christmas morning approached, the stage was set. A perfect holiday facade, new clothes, a family portrait, a house decorated with care. But behind it all, a darker story was unfolding. Charles wasn't just planning Christmas. He was planning something far more sinister. The story you are about to hear is one of love twisted into horror, of secrets buried beneath a snowy landscape. It's a tale that will leave you questioning how well we truly know those we hold dear. The morning of horror. It was Christmas morning 1929, a day meant to be filled with joy, laughter, and the warmth of family. Inside the modern Lawson farmhouse, the air was alive with the sounds of children's excitement. 4-year-old James and 2-year-old Raymond squealed with glee as they darted around the small living room, their tiny feet pattering on the creaky wooden floor. The 7-year-old Maybelle clutched her doll, spinning in circles, her laughter echoing against the frost-covered windows. In the kitchen, Fanny worked tirelessly, her hands moving with practiced ease as she prepared Christmas dinner. The smell of freshly baked bread mingled with the faint aroma of ham roasting in the oven. Her face was flushed from the heat of the stove, but her eyes held a softness, a mother's contentment as she watched her children bask in the magic of the holiday. But outside, another story was unfolding. Charles Lawson stood in the snow-covered yard, pacing in slow, deliberate circles. His breath rose in white puffs, disappearing into the frigid air. Neighbors would later recall seeing him there, his head bowed, his arms hanging limp at his sides. He wasn't dressed for the cold. No coat, no gloves, just his worn boots crunching against the ice beneath him. The frost bit at his fingers, but he didn't seem to notice. The wind howled through the trees, but Charles stood silent, his eyes fixed on something only he could see. It was as though the bitter cold had no claim on him, as though he had already left this world, tethered to something darker and far more chilling. Inside, the family was unaware. Their morning unfolded with the simple joys of Christmas, a momentary reprieve from the harsh realities of life on a struggling farm. They couldn't have known that death itself was pacing just outside their door, its shadow growing longer with each passing second. And then Charles called out, "Marie, Carrie." His voice was flat, devoid of the warmth one might expect on Christmas morning. The two eldest Lawson daughters, 17-year-old Marie and 12-year-old Carrie, stopped what they were doing and looked at each other. "He must need help with the firewood," Marie said, grabbing her coat. Carrie nodded, pulling on her boots. Neither hesitated, neither suspected a thing. The wind bit at their faces as they followed their father into the woods. The trees, bare and skeletal, loomed overhead, their branches swaying like crooked arms reaching for the sky. Charles walked ahead, his steps slow and deliberate, the shotgun slung over his shoulder. Marie and Carrie chatted softly as they trudged through the snow, their voices a fragile thread of life in the stillness of the frozen landscape. They didn't notice how tightly Charles gripped the shotgun, how his knuckles whitened with every step. And then he stopped. Without a word, Charles turned to face his daughters. For a moment there was only silence, the kind of silence that grips the chest and freezes the breath. Marie opened her mouth to speak, but the words never came. The shotgun's deafening roar shattered the stillness of the morning. Carrie's scream was lost to the cold wind as the blast sent her crumpling into the snow. Marie's eyes widened in shock. "Papa?" she whispered, her voice trembling, as though refusing to believe what she had just seen. But Charles didn't answer. He raised the shotgun again, the barrel now pointed at her. Marie turned to run, her feet slipping in the snow, but she didn't make it far. The second blast echoed through the forest, its sound rolling like thunder. Her body fell limp, her new Christmas coat quickly turning crimson. Charles stood over their lifeless bodies, his breath slow and steady. The snow beneath him was stained red, a chilling contrast to the pristine white that surrounded him. But his work wasn't finished. Not yet. He grabbed their bodies and dragged them to the barn, their lifeless forms leaving faint trails in the snow. He placed them carefully, as if staging a macabre display. The barn door creaked as it swung shut behind him, sealing the horror inside. Inside the house, the family waited, unaware of the darkness that had just descended on their quiet Christmas morning. For Charles, this was only the beginning, a father's descent into madness. Without warning, the morning air exploded with violence. Charles Lawson raised his shotgun, his movements deliberate, almost mechanical. His eyes, once distant, were now focused with terrifying precision as he aimed at 12-year-old Carrie. The first blast shattered the stillness, sending birds scattering from the nearby trees. Carrie's body crumpled to the ground, her wide eyes staring blankly at the grey winter sky. Mari screamed, her breath visible in the icy air, a fragile cloud against the mounting horror. She turned to run, her boots slipping on the frozen ground, but she wasn't fast enough. Charles raised the shotgun again, his movements eerily calm. The second blast echoed through the valley, louder than the first. Mari's body collapsed into the snow beside her sister, their lifeless forms quickly becoming part of the frozen landscape. The morning sun, which once promised warmth and joy, now illuminated only death. But Charles didn't stop. He grabbed their limp forms and dragged them into the barn. Neighbors would later describe the scene as grotesque, almost ritualistic. The bodies were arranged with care, as though Charles were creating some dark tableau meant for unseen eyes. Was this a moment of madness? Or was there something more sinister at play? Some whispered that Charles had fallen under the sway of a secret cult, a shadowy group rumored to operate in the remote hills of North Carolina. Stories had circulated for years about strange gatherings in the woods, of chants carried on the wind and bonfires burning late into the night. Could Charles have been drawn into their orbit? Was this massacre part of some dark ritual, meant to appease forces beyond our understanding? Whatever the reason, Charles's work wasn't done. He left the barn and returned to the house, his shotgun still warm from the morning's horrors. Fanny, his wife, stood in the kitchen, her back to him, as she worked on the Christmas feast. The table was set, a small ham rested on the counter, and the smell of freshly baked bread lingered in the air. Charles didn't hesitate. He raised the shotgun and fired. Fanny collapsed, her body crumpling amidst the meal she had lovingly prepared for her family. Her blood seeped across the wooden floor, mingling with the holiday cheer she had tried so hard to create. And then there was silence, but not for long. The younger children, hearing the commotion, ran to the front room. Their tiny footsteps echoed through the house, the sound almost painfully innocent against the backdrop of horror. "Mom!" little Maybelle called, her voice trembling. 4-year-old James clung to his sister's hand, his wide eyes searching the room. 2-year-old Raymond toddled behind, too young to understand, but sensing the fear that now gripped the air. Charles turned to face them. His expression was blank, an eerie void of emotion. His shotgun, however, spoke volumes. One by one, he fired. The blasts tore through the house, each shot silencing another small voice. 4-year-old James, 2-year-old Raymond, 7-year-old Maybelle. The walls, once adorned with simple decorations of garlands and ribbons, now bore the stains of unspeakable violence. And then there was nothing. The house fell silent, save for the faint creak of the floorboards as Charles reloaded his shotgun. Once, this the end of a man driven mad by desperation? Or was Charles fulfilling something far darker, something whispered to him in the dead of night, under the light of the moon? Some neighbors claimed Charles had been behaving strangely for months, talking to himself in the fields and wandering the woods late at night. Others swore they had seen him carrying objects into the barn. Candles, strange symbols carved into wooden boards, and even animal bones. The Lawson family Christmas was no longer a celebration of joy. It had become a scene of unimaginable horror, a tableau of death and mystery that would haunt Germanton for generations. As the snow continued to fall outside, it covered the farmhouse in an icy shroud, sealing within its walls the secrets of a man who had descended into madness, or perhaps something far more sinister. The sole survivor. Amidst the carnage of that fateful Christmas morning, one life was spared, a single thread left unbroken in the tapestry of destruction. 16-year-old Arthur Lawson was the only member of the family to survive. But his survival was not born of mercy. It was the result of a chilling decision made by his father, Charles, hours before the massacre unfolded. Earlier that morning, Charles had approached Arthur with a seemingly simple request. "Go into town," he said, handing him a list of errands. His voice was firm but unusually insistent. Arthur hesitated. Christmas morning was a time for family, for staying close to home, yet Charles's tone left no room for argument. "Go now," his father urged, the words heavy with an urgency Arthur couldn't quite place. Obediently, Arthur left. He walked through the snow-draped countryside, the crisp air biting at his cheeks, unaware of what he was leaving behind. For Arthur, the morning passed in a blur of routine. A trip to the store, brief conversations with townsfolk, and the quiet joy of knowing he would return home to his family and the warmth of Christmas dinner. But as Arthur made his way back to the farmhouse, something felt off. The air seemed heavier, the snow quieter. Even the wind had stilled, as if the world itself was holding its breath. When he reached the house, the first thing he noticed was the eerie silence. The kind of silence that wraps itself around you, pressing against your ears and chest. No laughter, no voices, only stillness. "Ma!" Arthur called, his voice breaking the quiet as he opened the door. The scene that greeted him was something no child, no human, should ever have to see. The house was a tableau of horror. Blood stained the walls and floors, mingling with the cheerful holiday decorations. The small Christmas tree, which had once brought light and joy, now stood as a stark reminder of the life that had been extinguished. Arthur's breath caught in his throat. His eyes darted around the room, desperate to make sense of what he was seeing. Then he saw her, his mother, Fanny. She lay crumpled in the kitchen, surrounded by the meal she had been preparing, her apron soaked in red. "Mama!" he cried, rushing forward. But he stopped short, his legs trembling as the full weight of the scene struck him. The silence was deafening, broken only by the creak of the floorboards under Arthur's feet. He turned slowly, his eyes taking in the rest of the house. There, in the living room, lay his siblings. James, Maybelle, little Raymond. Their small bodies, so full of life just hours before, now eerily still. His legs gave out and he sank to the floor. He wanted to scream, but no sound came. The house that had once been filled with the warmth of family was now a frozen graveyard. Arthur stumbled outside, gasping for air. The barn. He had to check the barn. He ran through the snow, his boots slipping on the icy ground. He threw open the heavy door and stopped, his stomach twisting in horror. There they were, Marie and Carrie, arranged in grotesque positions. Their lifeless eyes staged them, creating a grim monument to his madness. It hit him. His father. Charles was gone. Arthur's mind raced as he tried to piece it all together. Why had his father sent him away? Had Charles spared him? Or had he simply wanted Arthur to return and bear witness to the destruction he had wrought? As the snow continued to fall, blanketing the farmhouse in a deceptive serenity, Arthur stood frozen, his breath visible in the icy air. He was the sole survivor, left to carry the weight of a tragedy that no one could ever truly understand. Relief mixed with unbearable grief as he realized he had escaped death's grasp. But at a cost no soul should ever have to bear. A final haunting act. As the sun began to sink beneath the snow-draped horizon, Charles Lawson vanished into the woods behind his farmhouse. His shotgun hung loosely in one hand, and in the other he clutched a worn Bible. The wind howled through the barren trees, carrying with it the echoes of his family's final cries. A soundtrack of unspeakable horror that would haunt those woods forever. Back at the farmhouse, the grim scene was unfolding. Neighbors had begun to arrive, drawn by the sound of gunfire and the eerie stillness that followed. As word spread of the massacre, law enforcement quickly joined the gathering crowd. But Charles was nowhere to be found. He couldn't have gone far, someone muttered, their voice trembling with uncertainty. A party of neighbors and officers took to the frozen forest, their boots crunching through the thick snow. They called his name, their voices echoing through the skeletal trees, but the only reply was the mournful wail of the wind. Hours passed, the cold biting deeper with each step. The searchers' breath hung in the air like ghostly wisps, and unease began to creep into their hearts. It wasn't just the cold or the darkness, it was the feeling that something in those woods was watching them. Some whispered of strange occurrences in the area, tales of the woods being cursed, of spirits roaming the trees on cold winter nights. Others wondered aloud whether Charles was still alive, or if something darker had claimed him. Then it happened. A single gunshot through the stillness, the sound reverberating through the trees like thunder. The search party froze, their lanterns swaying as they turned toward the source of the noise. "It came from over there," one of them shouted, breaking the spell of silence. They moved quickly, their feet sinking into the deep snow, hearts pounding with dread. They found him slumped against an ancient oak tree, its twisted branches reaching skyward like skeleton arms. Charles's shotgun lay across his lap, the barrel still faintly warm. Blood seeped into the snow beneath him, forming a dark, jagged pool that seemed to consume the light. His head was tilted back, his lifeless eyes staring at the heavens. His mouth was slightly open, as though he had tried to speak one final word, but never had the chance. Beside him, his Bible lay open, its pages fluttering weakly in the cold wind. No one could agree on what passage it was turned to. Some claimed it was Revelation, others swore it was Psalm 23, but all agreed on one thing. This wasn't the act of a man seeking redemption. It was the act of a man haunted by demons no prayer could silence. Around the tree, the snow told another story. A series of footprints had worn deep into the ground, circling the oak like a solemn ritual. The pattern was clear. Charles had paced for hours, his boots carving a haunting rhythm into the snow, round and round as though trapped in a spiral of his own torment. Some searchers claimed to have found a note scribbled in the margins of his Bible, though its contents were never made public. Rumors spread like wildfire. Had Charles left a confession? A final plea for forgiveness? Or was it something more cryptic? An explanation too dark for the world to bear? One officer later remarked, "There was something about those woods that night. Something I can't explain. It felt like we weren't alone out there. Like he wasn't alone when he did it." If this chilling tale has captured your imagination, please take a moment to like this video and share it with others. Your support helps us uncover more haunting stories from history, bringing them to life for you. And don't forget to subscribe to Storyteller Pro. Hit the bell icon to ensure you never miss another tale that will send shivers down your spine. The story of Charles Lawson doesn't end with his death. The scars of that Christmas day lingered in Germanton for years, passed down in whispers and shadows. Was Charles simply a man who succumbed to madness, or was he driven by something darker, something hidden in those woods and those cursed hills? Some say you can still feel it today if you dare to venture near. A cold that cuts deeper than the winter chill, a silence heavier than the snow. And if you listen closely, you might just hear the faint echo of footsteps circling endlessly, forever pacing under the ghostly watch of the ancient oak. Theories, rumors, and dark secrets. Why did Charles Lawson commit one of the most horrific acts in Christmas history? That question has haunted Germanton for nearly a century. The answers remain elusive, shrouded in layers of speculation, dark theories, and unsettling whispers that refuse to fade. Some say the weight of the world finally crushed Charles, a man caught in the grip of the Great Depression. Life on the farm was grueling, the tobacco fields offering little reward for endless toil. Perhaps the crushing weight of financial despair convinced Charles there was no way out, no path forward for his struggling family. But others believe his torment ran deeper than mere economic hardship. Months before the massacre, Charles reportedly suffered a severe head injury while working on the farm. Friends and neighbors noticed a change in him after that day, a subtle but undeniable shift in his demeanor. He wasn't the same, one neighbor recalled. It was like something in him broke. His temper got worse. He'd stare off into the distance like he wasn't there anymore. Could this injury have sparked a descent into madness? Some medical experts believe it's possible. A traumatic brain injury can alter behavior, lead to violent outbursts, or even cause hallucinations. Did Charles's injury awaken a darkness within him? A darkness he could no longer control? But there's another theory, one far more disturbing, far more personal. In the months before the massacre, whispers began to circulate through Germanton. Rumors that Marie, Charles's eldest daughter, was pregnant. But not by a boyfriend. The rumors pointed to Charles himself. Marie's friends later came forward with chilling accounts. One friend claimed Marie had confided in her, revealing that her father had been abusing her for months. The pregnancy, if true, was a secret too dark to remain hidden for long. Marie told me, the friend whispered years later, that she was scared. She said she couldn't tell anyone because it was her father's. If the rumors are true, then the massacre takes on a horrifying new context. Was Charles consumed by the fear of exposure? Did he believe that killing his family and himself was the only way to bury the truth? But even this theory leaves questions unanswered. Why would Charles dress his family in new clothes and commission a professional photograph in the weeks before the murders? Was this his way of preserving their image as a perfect family? An illusion he wanted the world to remember? Or was it something darker? a twisted farewell, a carefully staged prelude to the nightmare he had already planned. And then there are the whispers of even stranger events. Some neighbors claimed Charles had become obsessed with the idea of curses. He had spoken of dreams, visions of shadowy figures standing at the edge of the woods, calling his name. He said he saw things at night, one old neighbor recounted, things that didn't belong in this world. He thought they were after him, after his family. Maybe that's why he did it, to stop them from taking his kids. And then there's the barn. Long before the massacre, some neighbors swore they heard strange noises coming from the Lawson barn at night. Low murmurs, chanting, the sound of something heavy being dragged. When asked about it, Charles would dismiss the questions with a tight-lipped smile, his gaze shifting uneasily. "Just working late," he'd say. But the unease in his voice betrayed something else. And what of the note reportedly found near his body? To this day, its contents remain a mystery. Law enforcement never revealed its exact words, fueling speculation that it contained something too horrifying to share. Did Charles confess to his crimes? Did he reveal the reason for his unimaginable actions? Or was it something more cryptic, a riddle, a warning, or a final chilling message meant for those who would follow in his footsteps? The truth of why Charles Lawson murdered his family may never be fully known. Was it madness born of desperation, a father consumed by guilt and fear? Or was it something darker, something that lived in the shadows of those hills, whispering into his mind? Even now, nearly a century later, Germanton remains haunted by these questions. The house is long gone, but the land itself carries a strange stillness, as though the ground remembers the horrors it once bore. That the areas abound, but the answers are buried, lost to time and snow, hidden among the shadows of the trees where Charles Lawson's footsteps still echo, circling endlessly. Legacy of tragedy. The Lawson farmhouse, once a modest home filled with the laughter of children and the warmth of a loving family, became something else entirely after that fateful Christmas day. A place of unspeakable horror, it transformed almost overnight into a macabre tourist attraction. Word of the massacre spread like wildfire, drawing thousands of curious visitors to Germanton. They came from nearby towns, from distant cities, even from under the earth. They wanted to see with their own eyes the house where joy turned to tragedy, where a father's love twisted into violence. The bloodstains, eerily enough, were never fully scrubbed away. In the living room, crimson streaks marred the wooden floorboards, ghostly reminders of the lives stolen that day. Onlookers whispered as they pointed to the marks, their voices hushed, as though speaking too loudly might disturb the spirits said to linger there. But it wasn't just the sight of the house that unsettled visitors. Many claimed to hear strange noises, vapory smoke, phantom echoes of a family trapped between this world and the next. Some swore they heard the faint laughter of children, disembodied giggles that seemed to float through the empty rooms. Others reported hearing the low hum of Christmas carols, the notes hanging in the air like a cruel reminder of what had been lost. And then there were those who heard the shotgun blast. "I heard it clear as day," one visitor claimed years later, "like it was right there next to me. But when I turned, there was nothing, just the house." The Lawson tragedy didn't just leave a mark on the land, it left a scar on the culture itself. Folk songs were written, their mournful melodies preserving the story for generations. Books chronicled the events, each author offering new theories, new angles, new horrors. But perhaps the most haunting legacy is the story itself, a tale passed down through whispers, kept alive by the morbid curiosity of those who cannot look away from the darkness. Even now, nearly a century later, the ground where the Lawson farmhouse once stood is said to carry an eerie stillness. Though the house is gone, the air feels heavy, as though the land itself remembers. Some who visit the site claim to feel a sudden chill, even on the warmest of days. Others speak of hearing faint whispers in the wind, voices calling out from the past. Thank you for joining us for this haunting tale of the Lawson family Christmas Day massacre. If this story left you as captivated and chilled as it did us, please take a moment to like this video, comment below, and share it with others. And don't forget to subscribe to Storyteller Pro for more deep dives into history's most mysterious and tragic events. The Lawson family Christmas Day massacre is a stark reminder of the darkness that can hide behind even the brightest of lights. As we celebrate the holidays, let us hold our loved ones close and remember the importance of love, compassion, and understanding. But as we bask in the warmth of the season, spare a thought for the shadows, for the whispers that echo through the past, and for the families whose stories, like the Lawsons, remind us how fragile our joys can be. The end.